Let me give people the obligatory bio. Leonard David, space journalist, the guy that I call the dean of space journalists. He's been reporting on everything space for well over 50 years now. Moonrush, like I said, it's Moonrush, the New Space Race. That's the full title, published by National Geographic. I hope all of you have read and enjoyed it now. He's also the author of Mars, Our Future on the Red Planet, also published by National Geographic a few years before. That was a companion volume to that TV series that National Geographic did, mixed fact and fiction. That we ran into each other somewhere, Beverly Hills or Hollywood or something, where they had a big premiere. He wrote with Buzz Aldrin another book, Mission to Mars, My Vision for Space Exploration. That came out in 2013. Also published by the National Geographic Society, and there's a soft cover version of that done in 2015. Leonard was the first recipient of the American Astronautical Society's Ordway Award for Sustained Excellence in Spaceflight History in the category of journalism. That was in 2015. And so many other awards. I mean, just a few. National Space Club Press Award, at the Robert H. Goddard Memorial Dinner. Is that the one they call the Space Prom?
The Space Prom. That was quite a night. I'm on the stage with Bob Ballard.
Man.
We were all on this long stage, but having Bob Ballard there to listen to him talk about exploration of undersea and what he was trying to showcase there with all his underwater work for space. It was pretty interesting. Great night.
Another great character too.
Yep.
You're still at space.com, right? You're still doing stuff for them.
The last time I looked.
And people can look you up on your own website, leonarddavid.com. All one word, leonarddavid.com, to get the latest on what you're up to. There were a couple of things here that I either had forgotten or never knew about. That in the mid-'80s, you were the director of research for the National Commission on Space, a study that praised, it said in your bio, the next 50 to 100 years of space exploration. And I also did not know that you had been the editor-in-chief of the magazine Ad Astra from our friends at the National Space Society, and our friend Rod Pyle, who has that job now.
We're still comparing notes. Rod Pyle and myself,
He's a great guy.
He's doing a great job.
And it's a beautiful magazine. I just love it. Are you at home somewhere high above Golden, Colorado?
I'm in between Boulder and Golden, about 9,000 feet, closer to the moon from here. And it flew by last night. It was great last night. We have big windows, so it's a pretty exciting panorama we get.
Just dress warmly if you go out.
Yeah, well, I am. I'm waiting for the weather from California to hit. We're ready for the next wave.
Good luck. Let me tell you the first thing that grabbed me in this book. I mean, other than the fact that it was about one of my favorite topics, it was your memory from when you were a kid going to Disneyland and riding on the rocket to the moon, which I remember, though I'm slightly younger than you, I remember it better as Mission to Mars. Was this more, seeing this progression, is this more evidence that we need to go to the moon first and then we can go to Mars?
I think so. I think, when I went on there, the TWA rocket to the moon was right. I mean, I got on that, and, they had two screens, one looking down, one up. And we left what seemed pretty futuristic, something called a spaceport, and now we got spaceport. So, and it was a great ride. It wasn't, you didn't get any microgravity in there. Your seat kind of inflated. I remember that. And so that was supposed to be microgravity. So I figured, well, I must be okay. I don't feel woozy after the seat expanded, so I guess I'm ready to go. Anyway, it was a great ride. And I think it was wasn't it an e-ticket?
Oh, it had to be an e-ticket.
Had to be.
And Mission to Mars, they actually improved it. They had side screens,
Yeah.
and there was like an audio animatronic mission control that you go through first, with a guy in a mustache who tells you about your trip. And then they actually had warp drive because, you know, you had to get to Mars really fast and back again. It was such fun, and it was such an inspiration for me as a kid. I mean, it sounds like it was the same for you.
Oh yeah. Well, I think the moon ride to me was one of the things that I to this day can still see is we're going on the far side of the moon, and it was dark on the far side when our ship went by, but they launched these flares.
Yes, yes.
And they hit the ground and they exploded, and you kind of saw bigger craters, whatever. But then it wasn't only like one or two flares. The guy goes, "We don't know what this structure is." And the flare goes out and was clearly a building back on the back side of the moon. So you're like, "Oh man, we got to go. We got to go." So yeah, that thing is frozen in my mind, but that was just a great ride.
I'm totally with you. It probably did as much as almost anything else. That and maybe the Disney one of Von Braun. I think they called it Man in Space series.
Yeah,
Now
that series on Disney. I mean, when
Yeah.
you really think about the history of all this, I mean, Walt Disney as a communicator really fell in line with Von Braun and I think Willie Lay and all these other early pioneers, but particularly Von Braun, having them on a show. I mean, these were real people doing the dream stuff that you're waiting for. So
and this is before Von Braun fell from grace, of course. Tell me about the dedication to the book, the two gentlemen that you dedicated the book to.
I dedicated it to Larry Taylor, a good friend of mine, and Larry. The last time I saw Larry was in Houston, and he had a piece of the Chelyabinsk meteorite. He actually got a sample of it, and he said, "Do you want to see it?" And I said, "Yeah, I'll see it." And he put it in my hand, and unfortunately, it fell out of my hand and went on the floor. And the floor of the Lunar Planetary Science Conference, the Texas meeting place, you couldn't see where the Chelyabinsk went. It took us 20 minutes to find it, but we got it.
Oh God!
And the other person I dedicated to is Paul Sputis, just a first-rate. He constantly beat me up every time I made a little mistake in something, and he was great. I really learned quite a bit from Paul Sputis, and everybody still is because of his books and quite a number of articles he wrote for, I think, Air and Space magazine. He had an ongoing series, and he was just, it's corny to say ahead of his time, but I wish he was here to see what was going on now, because he really he was on the forefront of thinking about all this stuff.
Before we get really into the book, just a little non sequitur. Were you a member of the Mars Underground?
I was a member of the Mars Underground, but I'm going to have ego time here. I kind of coined the phrase in an article for a magazine.
I didn't
saying
know
that there was an underground movement of people in different parts of the country for real that were hungry to get to Mars. And in that group were the University of Colorado Boulder people, and particularly Carol Stoker, Chris McKay, Penny Boston.
Yep.
I mean, these are names that are like, locked in now on Mars exploration. We also had Carter Emmart, a great artist that transformed the conferences we had, the Case for Mars, into artwork. And same with, we had Paul Hudson from was one of the artists that came in to our meetings. So yeah, Mars Underground was pretty real. I mean, it was kind of a. I made buttons. I handed out buttons. You know, a Mars Underground member. You had to hide the button on your lapel, and every time a NASA administrator would come by, you'd have to flash the badge.
Like a secret handshake.
Yeah, that's a great story. It would take too long. There's a lot of other things, tentacles that Mars Underground got into.
You named a lot of my heroes who I knew were also identified with the Mars Underground, and it's Penny Boston, who was there when I fell on my, you'll pardon the expression, ass in bat guano deep in a cave once.
Yeah. She's something. It's one of those things where every once in a while I've been in the field, quote unquote. Yellowstone was a pretty revolutionary time. I went with some Mars scientists, so I quoted for so many years, and to actually see them in the field, dirty, on their knees, taking samples of, goo from Yellowstone or something. And I was really excited about that. These people are really doing the real deal here.
And they're still helping to lead us out there.
Oh, yeah.
Speaking of people who certainly qualified to be in the Mars Underground, whether he was or not, from the opening of the book, your co-author, Buzz Aldrin, let me read this bit from his little essay. What I do know is that beyond returning to the moon, occupying Mars is a task like no other. That undertaking, I firmly believe, can unite the great nations of the world in a cooperative, beneficial way. We can set sail to Mars, eventually putting in place a flourishing civilization step by step. This peaceful pursuit is unparalleled in history. It is time to place spacefaring nations on that unified trajectory. Did that resonate with you?
Oh yeah, no, it was a great experience working with Buzz. He's still going, he's still thinking. He's got 10 ideas since we started talking.
True. And he'll tell all of them to you too.
Yeah, and he and I linked up quite a long time ago, and then when this book came about, we sit down and interview him. And you try to figure out, after you've read some other books that he's done, what can I ask? It hasn't been beaten to death, but I tell you, he's just a really generous, great guy, and I learned a lot from him, and he also learned a lot about writing and what we needed to. Okay, that's too many words. And we got to cut it down.
I wouldn't want to be, because I've interviewed him, I wouldn't want to be the one to sit down with Buzz.
Yeah, well,
Buzz, you've said too much.
I'm not sure. Sometimes I did win and didn't win, but trying to explain cycling spaceships in a paragraph was a little rough. But he all his MIT upbringing and Mr. Dr. Rendezvous and all this kind of thing, he was still flinging it, and he at me, and I was trying to decipher all that in a way that I knew the public could grab onto it. And I think we succeeded at the end of the day. Yeah,
I think so. I'm let me go back to my notes here. I am always taken aback. It seems surreal to me that President Kennedy made that great speech at Rice University, the "We will go to the moon" speech. It was only 35 years after Charles Lindbergh flew across the Atlantic in the Spirit of St. Louis. And we are much farther past that speech now than Kennedy was past Lindbergh. Even though it may seem like things are going slowly sometimes, that's not true, is it?
Well, I'm caught as I get older. Let's get going. I'm kind of, I don't know how long I got to go here, and try to keep my fingers on the computer keys and put out another story. But in some ways, I'm kind of disappointed. We got derailed. We got off track and the money. Where's the money? Where's the, and living in Washington D.C., I did that for about 30 years. I'm an escapee of that institution there, which is pretty much
Congrats.
is. Yeah, it's a grinder. Running after people down the hallway trying to get a quote, and it just it got me a little tired of it all. But the policy and all the great people you meet, unbelievable. Just coming through, giving talks. You mentioned the National Commission on Space. That wouldn't have happened unless I probably wouldn't have been in D.C. at the time and got asked to join that and help out. And that was a great, Neil Armstrong's on the committee. I mean, Chuck Yeager. I mean, the names are Kathy Sullivan. I mean, we had an unbelievable committee of people that tried to look out 50 years, and see where we could be and why we needed to be. So that was a great experience for sure.
Did you get to interview Neil Armstrong?
My story with Neil Armstrong is working with him and being there late at night in the commission and talking to him. And it was like one of those things, you just don't want to bore him with a bunch of questions. I mean, we were kind of working on the commission report, and Neil was right there, working on this thing. And unfortunately, a friend of mine, we were in the office, it was just the three of us. And my friend asked Neil, "You want to go to dinner?" Okay. So, he goes, "Yeah, let's go to dinner." All right. So I'm driving Neil Armstrong in traffic in Washington, D.C., trying to get to dinner. And you want to have, the jitters, because there's nothing but circles in Washington, D.C. You're just going around in these circles. So that was that was the worst thing I've ever gone through. And then to have Buzz in there, another time, driving Buzz around. So it's I got to be a taxi driver for the first two people on the moon. I don't know.
I can only, all I can say that comes anywhere near that is that I did get to drive Buzz's car once.
Yeah, really?
Yeah, he had parked it in a spot where he was going to get a ticket when he was visiting the Planetary Society.
Yeah.
And I went to tell him, and he threw me his keys. And so I moved his very nice Saab convertible into a legal parking spot.
Okay, now I got to top this because here's one. I just remembered it.
Uh-huh.
I'm at a conference, and I had got to know Scott Crossfield. He was the X-15 pilot.
Right.
He was working on Capitol Hill, and he was a staff aide at some point. Anyway, I got to know him through that. But we're in San Diego at a conference.
My town.
And he comes, he says, can you take me to the airport? And I couldn't leave because I think it was a meeting that I was sort of organized or something. I can't remember what it was. But my friend, I said, he'll take you. And my friend's going, now my car is this and that, and I don't go very fast. He looked at me because, son, I've gone 4,000 miles an hour. Or whatever it was. It's like, okay, that's good enough. He got him there. Right? Anyway.
All right. Yeah. Anyway, no, this is great. I would just love to do anecdotes the whole time. And you will have some more opportunities, even as we talk about the book. I told you, I said you have this great concise history of the moon itself. And there were surprises in there for me about that as well. I'm thinking of the speculation by some good researchers, more than one, that there may actually have been a time on the moon when the moon could have supported life. Maybe even two periods when it could have supported life.
Yeah.
The magnificent desolation. You don't think of anything alive up there.
I put that in the book, and it's one of those, you take a chance because everybody will jump on you like, But there's, kind of some work at Goddard Space Flight Center now about the potential of the water ice in the polar regions that could be traps for organic material, and could it be some kind of life in there? How do we go explore that? We don't want to drain it out right away and try to make, water out of it or something. But so I try to, and I think that, just to be a little in the future, I think that as I get older, I get more into the ethics of it all. What responsibility do we have as explorers? What have we learned here that we should be applying to our lunar and Mars kind of growth? So I put that in there, and Paul Lucy in Hawaii is the one that kind of rang my email bell when he had that. He talked about astrobiology potential on the moon, and so there's some pretty good thinking about it. And I'm up for surprises. I think that's what I want to put in the book. Let's have some surprises.
There will be, no doubt.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Here's another one that was a surprise to me. These so-called lunar swirls on the surface, many of which are associated with, coincide with these magnetic aberrations as well. Now, of course, what I want to find out is, are there monoliths under or beneath all of these, a few meters down that we can dig up and name after Stanley Kubrick. But the moon, there's so much going on up there that we still have to learn, isn't there?
Yeah, I try to get to that right up front. I said, look, if you don't want to read this, I'm sorry, but, if you think the moon has been explored, just, get another book, because I'm trying to tell you that it's not a been there, done that world. Just because Apollo went, with humans, very limited capability that we have there, but pioneering and all the great kudos to the Apollo program. But we got some definite surprises ahead. No matter what's coming, it's going to be really exploration at its best, unknown.
So if we jump into the 1960s, the early 1960s, you mention and tell the story, a little bit of the story of one of the greatest friends of the Planetary Society, a guy who was a true lunar exploration pioneer, James Burke. He advised us. He worked on our magazine for many, many years. We just lost him very recently. Did you know Jim well? And obviously you enjoyed his stories of those early days and trying to get something to the moon.
Right. I mean, he was a real force, and he was that way for all of his years. And I think I mentioned his estrangement that he had with the Ranger program, because he was a program leader there, and they were not having successes. The things were auguring in. We were missing the moon. They had to go back to bare wood on there. And when you talk about bare wood, it's kind of a pun, I think. Those early ones had this balsa wood ball on there that had a seismometer in it, and they were going to crash those and bounce around and get some data. And I always wanted that to happen, but it didn't.
Me too.
Well, I think one of the Rangers actually went around to the far side, and I keep fantasizing maybe somewhere they'll find the wreckage and see that balsa wood ball sitting there. But I would love that.
As a kid, I had exactly the same hope that little balsa wood ball would bounce across the moon for a bit and send us back a little bit of data. And then they got rid of it when they redesigned the Rangers, and it finally worked.
It finally worked, but the one that this is anecdotal, I'm sorry, but I'm out there in my little 4.25-inch reflector telescope in San Diego on the driveway at God knows what time it was in the morning. Had the TV on, little TV, and JPL, Al Hibbs, or whoever was the communicator was saying, Ranger 6 coming in. It's getting closer. We have 30 seconds, 20, the countdown's on, and you can hear the transmitter squealing away. And I'm looking through the telescope. I want to see the flash because I'm convinced that when it hits, it's just going to be this massive thing.
Yeah.
And then it ends and he goes impact, and I'm looking through the lens and I saw a million flashes. You just imagine anything.
Yeah.
But they didn't get pictures.
Yeah.
The camera didn't come on. And that's where you circle back to Jim Burke. That was probably one of the last things that he had to go to the Capitol Hill and testify. Why are these things not working? But I'd love to talk to Jim about today. We've had some interesting failure recently with a private vehicle, Astrobotic. And then we've had what to me is still a mystery item here of what actually took place with the intuitive machines.
Odysseus.
Yeah, pretty interesting. But I'd love to hear Jim's comments about how they designed that and how they built this and that. He'd just be great.
As we speak, I watched yesterday. They had a great press conference with the Intuitive Machines folks.
Right.
And I assume, I have not checked, but I assume that they've now lost touch with it. But I was going to bring this up because it is such a good example of one of the things that has happened in just the 5 years since this book was published, less than 5 years.
Yeah.
And I think that they're entitled to call that mission last week a success, even if it's, lying over at a 30-degree angle.
Yeah. I'm having a little trouble with that one. I'm not quite there yet. I've got people beating up on me for sure. There was a lot of, at some point here, we got to move on away from the engineering side of success and look at the science delivery. Because, NASA paid a lot of money. I mean, it's not a lot in the big scheme of things, but if I had it, I'd be wealthy. It's a lot of money still involved in putting these payloads on there. And many of these are designed, one has been told by NASA, as important ingredients for the Artemis program to stick the human landings on the moon and know what we're doing when we get there. So I'm not sure what we got on science return from Intuitive. It seems somewhat chaotic trying to piece it together, but getting there with a LiDAR and the other problem, they had another problem with a laser problem.
Right.
But the next one that they are going to go for is at Shackleton crater, and it's a little ridge that they're going to try to hit. In fact, I try to find out today, how big is that ridge? A ridge sounds like, ridge over troubled water. I just worry that we got
over troubled ice in this case.
Yeah, I know. Hopefully there's ice all over the place, and they got a thing they're going to shoot out and hopper and do all these great things. So, well, I hope I hope it works. It'd be great to have all these things down. But at some point, the science of Artemis has got to get caught up with these payloads. And we want to inform the Artemis program as much as possible with what these people are going to run into if they land in that same area. So, science is important.
I couldn't be happier to hear you say that, along with everybody at the Planetary Society, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Artemis 2, that trip around the moon, first time back for humans in, what'll it be if this happens in 85? That'll be 56 years after Apollo 11. Still a year and a half off, but looking back to Apollo, I didn't know until I read the book that Apollo 1, which I'd always known as Apollo 1, was not Apollo 1 until after the terrible tragic fire. And that because they wanted to honor Gus Grissom and Chaffee and Ed White, that was when it became Apollo 1, which I think was very fitting.
Yeah, that was another one of those moments when I came home from high school, and all of a sudden on the radio you'd hear something happen with the crew, and I thought, God, they didn't even launch yet. What could have happened?
Yeah.
So yeah, and then to piece that together. Now today with the internet, my God, we'd be really more informed. I mean, somewhere in my library, I've got all the GPO, the Apollo 204 fire volumes of what they found, what was wrong, why this was not done, and it was a huge effort to try to pin that down. But yeah, we lost three great people on that one, and this loss of life thing is always it's a tough one. I think of all the things I've reported on, going down to Johnson Space Center to cover for Space.com the Columbia tragedy. That was rough. That was a tough thing, and you got pretty much in the face of all the people testifying and literally trying to piece together what really happened here. And then, to be honest with you, it's a long story. I don't want to get into that one. But years later, I had the opportunity, I guess it's an opportunity, to see the recovered Columbia wreckage at the Kennedy Space Center up in the vehicle assembly building. They had a room up there with all this material at one point. I don't know if it's still in there, but it's, twisted wings and tires and boy, I tell you, that I cried. It was awful. Yeah, it was rough.
I remember where I was both those times, Challenger and Columbia, and how I felt.
But I think we got to get ready. I mean, I don't think you can always think this is a slam dunk field. Again, it's a corny cliche. Space is hard. Well, it is hard.
Yeah.
And I've seen some pretty weird things over the decades of things that didn't go right on spacecraft or whatever, and it's an unforgettable kind of place to be, where if something doesn't line up right, and you can have a major catastrophe. So it's pretty amazing time, and we'll see how. Again, the ethics of it all is, what are we going to do? What's the public going to react like for loss of life? These are all pioneers to some extent, particularly going beyond low Earth orbit now. Yeah, but that was a tough, probably one of the fun ones was being there the night that Hubble regained its focus.
Oh.
I was at the Space Telescope Science Institute, and they had Gene Shoemaker on the stage. They had his wife. They had another, I think, Ed Weiler or some, NASA people or something. Everybody's waiting for this telescope to say, "I'm working," and the door flies open, and I think it was Heidi Hamel.
Oh yeah, our vice president at the society.
Yeah, Heidi runs in. I think she had a bottle of champagne. I can't remember.
I'll ask her. I'll ask her.
You ask her. I'm pretty sure, or I imagine that, or I should have gotten one for her or something. I don't know. But yeah, it was great, and seeing that telescope come in line, because boy, watching, and it's one of the problems we have with the space program. Particularly Hubble got to me quite a number of ways, because you have a PR mentality about Hubble pre-launch that, this thing's going to show you the face of God. By the time you write all the copy and ballyhoo what's going to happen, and then the shuttle goes and it actually gets deployed and it's out there, and then it's out of focus. Yeah. And you're like, oh my God, this is going to take a while to decipher this one. But there were so many other side stories of Lockheed Martin, Bruce McCandless working, trying to figure out, can I go down in the Hubble and full of stuff. And he told me, he said, no, there's no way Mission Control is going to let me down in the tube. But yeah, well, anyway, that was a pretty exciting time.
This speaks to something that you address at the end of the book. The things that we need to do if we're going to make a success of all of this exploration of the cosmos. And that is getting a new attitude toward risk and maybe becoming more tolerant of it. SpaceX seems pretty risk tolerant, but then they haven't lost any lives at SpaceX.
Right. It's a changeover when it happens because, it's a grim thing. But I think, in getting back to your lunar landers and CLIPS, the commercial thing, I'm a little paranoid about failure as an option. They're trying to put that out there like it's okay to crash and burn a bunch of times. And I don't know, at some point, people after a while don't care about the money so much as they're going to say, well, they fouled up another one. And so the failure is an option. It doesn't look like an option to me. I think we got to get honed down, and I've talked to some of the people on this intuitive machines today, and they learned a lot for sure. That was one of the benefits of engineering. They learned a lot.
They say they're going to nail it next time. They'll turn on the laser rangefinder.
It's a small ridge. How big is that ridge? I hope they hit it.
Here's a quote from the book. One of my favorite paragraphs. It's right from the opening of chapter 4. 50 years ago, half century in time and space, now it's like 55 years, 2 astronauts carefully descended a 9-rung ladder attached to their fragile spaceship called the Eagle. Each took one small step to set foot on the time-weathered, dusty, and desolate moon. The voyage from Earth was the culmination of a bold, risky gambit shouldered by some 400,000 people who banded together to make real a vision. It was a unified enterprise, a mix of government, industry, and academic wherewithal that transformed a long-held dream into reality. And I want to ask you about what that says to us today about how to make successes like that happen again. But first, I want to ask, where were you on July 20th, 1969?
Let's see. That's a good question. Actually, it was a girlfriend's house, and everybody fell asleep. Everybody left. It took so long to get Neil and Buzz out of the lander that I think people gave up on it, but I groggily stayed with it, and it was pretty hazy stuff compared to where we were later on with the color cameras and all that. So you had I think I see a person there. It looks good.
Hard to tell.
From the moon. What do you want?
I felt the same way. Yeah.
What do you want? So yeah, it was a pretty impressive. And these people. This is one of those Buzz stories. We were at a meeting in Little Rock, and Buzz and I are on the stage, and we were on a book tour, and I'm asking Buzz questions, from the audience was asking stuff. And then one time, the only time it ever happened, somebody came up to the microphone and said, "You hit a guy that said you didn't go to the moon."
Boom, in the nose.
And I'm going, oh no, I haven't heard this one. I don't know what he's going to say. I'm starting to move in the chair. I'm thinking, is he really? He goes, it was his pause. And he's right in front of thousands of people in this auditorium. And he said, yeah, he called me a liar. And the whole place goes, yay. It was just, one of those, I just was so paranoid whatever his answer was going to be, but they loved it. But yeah, the fake moon people, that is a little, it's amazing it's still going on in some
infuriates me.
The world.
Absolutely infuriates me that they would take one of the greatest achievements in the history of humankind, and make up lies about it and say it never happened.
Yeah, well, and I think, the whole thing about the Artemis program, I think, as far as I can tell, I hope, we have a very limited amount of Apollo astronauts that actually walked on the moon. Dave Scott, particularly Jack Schmitt, is always on these meetings, always trying to tell anybody and everybody, don't do that, do this, and the hammer's got to be this way and whatever. I do hope there's some, not invented here problem there. We need to, the heritage of Apollo is still given great examples of what Artemis should build on, and that carries the legacy of one small step. That's from Neil.
Yeah,
keep it going.
I'm sort of edging us toward the future, our future on the moon, which is largely what you talk about in the book, of course. But I've been putting off asking you some of the questions that are coming in from our members. And we have a lot of you out there. If you joined us late, of course, we're talking to Leonard David. And stick around, because we're going to give away, he's going to give away a signed copy of the book Moonrush. But that will be to the first person to answer the question that we're going to ask toward the end of our time together, which we have we could go at another half hour or so. Leonard, you said you got a little bit more time if we go past the hour here. Thank you.
Okay, if it's okay with everybody.
It's okay with me.
I'll come up with new stories.
I'm
trying to make sure I don't have any kind of mental forgetfulness.
No, you're doing great so far. Here's one from Philip Shane. Leonard, have you petitioned to be the first journalist in space? Do you still want to get up there?
People think that, I should be ready, but I don't know. I keep thinking, am I afraid of heights? I'm up here at 9,000 feet. That may be it for me. I'm not quite sure. And I have trouble getting up the ladder if I have to change a light bulb. So I don't know. I've met a lot of astronauts over the decades, and they're a special cut. I see we lost Richard Truly here. I did know him pretty well. He lived here in Colorado, and we bumped into each other quite a bit. He was a commander and ran NASA for quite a while. And Richard Truly was a guy that got the word that he had to go. And Richard, forgive me, but I had a plaque made. I made it, actually. And he said when he was asked to leave NASA, the head of NASA, he said it came like a bolt out of the blue. Okay, well, I was running the American Astronautical Society luncheon speaker program. And so I had Richard Truly already booked, and he got fired, and here he is. Or he came back. I can't remember what the sequence was. But anyway, I made a plaque that had a bolt. And half of the plaque was blue, and then there was a bolt, and I gave it to and I think he laughed. I don't know. I was so afraid of this, but I think the audience thought it was funny.
Yeah, I would like to think that he was entertained as well.
Yeah, but he was a really consummate astronaut too.
He had nothing to be ashamed of, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Here's a question from Susan Stalker. So much history has happened on the moon. Do you have a favorite story, either from the book or something that's happened since then?
I think I was a little surprised myself, and I don't want to make it sound like I was stupid, but I somehow I thought we figured out where the moon came from. Somewhere I missed it, that we didn't have the right connection of science papers yet about where the moon came from.
Mm-hmm.
Why is it there, and what history did it have, and did it come from the Earth, or was it a captured thing, a Mars object hit something, or whatever it was. And as I started talking to people, I realized we didn't have the picture. we don't know what is that thing there. And I think that's a great reason to go and find. Now, Jack Schmidt, he's a geologist, and that was one of the criticalities of the Apollo program, and makes sense in some weird way that the last person on the moon was a scientist. But I mean, he trained a lot of the other Apollo moonwalkers to be pretty special geologists. But yeah, not knowing slam dunk where the moon originated from and how it coalesced and what is it? What story is that going to tell us for 4.6 billion, whatever it is?
I'm reminded that William Hartman, Bill Hartman from Planetary Science Institute, the guy who led at least the leading theory on how it happened, the big impact on Earth and threw all that stuff out there that coalesced into the moon. But you actually quote Bill Hartman. You talk about his research, indicating that maybe we're all wrong about some of our thinking about the moon's history, the late heavy bombardment, and it also kind of touches on how science works, and how sometimes it doesn't quite get it right.
Right.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
And Bill was sending me papers. I had to read these really technical papers he was sending me. And I said, I got to get this in. I mean, he's trying to upset the whole apple cart here, of at least where some majority of people were. So that was good. Tension in the book.
Right.
You want to have some kind of, again, the scientific process. That's two words that I always find funny. It's a process, I guess, but boy, there's a lot of dead ends, that people agree to and then get a PhD on and then have to back off later on. So, today when you go to the Lunar Planetary Science Conference, one of the most heartening things I've seen over the years is the young people coming in. Women, dominating, a lot of women now in very senior science positions. That's changed since I started going to that thing.
Yeah, me too.
That is great. I mean, and they're less cautious. They're more like, well, what if the thing? I could see a computer program that we could get the thing, and okay, fine. There's no water on the moon. Okay, show me the paper. That's great. And, let's see where they go. It's a fascinating generation coming of explorers.
Yeah, that's a great group of scientists, up and coming. Here's one from Albert Hagee. And it goes back to your concern about considering the ethics of going back to the moon and for that matter, human space exploration. Albert says, do you think we could ever get behind a new Earth rush rather than a moon rush, making our dying planet back into a beautiful world? And, I'll follow up with that question that people like you and I and everybody else in this industry are always asked. What's in it for humanity to put humans back up there? Is it worth it?
Yeah. Well, it's a good one. As you get older, you get a little more cynical about it all. And planetary engineering is interesting. A lot of people have looked at Mars and whether, we could alter that planet, have that as a template for, fooling around down here maybe. But the whole geoengineering of the Earth is really a dicey. I just read a paper this morning, somebody's new idea, and change the albedo, fool with the sun, put a big screen in front of out in orbit. Then we have the whole re-emerging the solar power satellite concept, using that for energy. There's no shortage of great ideas. I don't know how we're going to do any of them, but we are terraforming the planet to a certain degree, and that's not a good degree we want to be in. That's the point. So we'll see. We're up at 9,000 feet, and we've had some heavy snows, but nothing like some other places. So I'm waiting.
Yeah.
Our fire, that's our big worry here. Big fires everywhere.
Yeah. Good luck with that.
Oh, yeah.
Mark Dunning asks, what would change if the book was written now, post-COVID, post-City on Mars? I don't know if you've seen that book, A City on Mars by the Wienersmiths. We had them on just a couple of months ago. Very entertaining, very good book. And a lot of these considerations about, I mean, they're space geeks. They want us to go, but they're saying, let's do this right. I mean, would any of this have affected how you wrote the book?
Yeah, I think that there must be about 4 or 5 now that I'm trying to get through. They're a little on the ethics side. And I know I should read it because people hate the book. The space cadet community, I can tell, are jittery about that logic that they're trying to put forth. And so I love that. Tension. You need the tension. We got the opposite kind of going on with Elon Musk. I love the guy, and that's a great interview talking to him a couple times.
Yeah.
When nobody knew who he was,
way back. One of those. Yeah.
Just out of PayPal, I think. And but we got the Starship believers, and Elon's trying to, like you said, haven't had too many trial runs of this thing yet before I'm climbing on. And Tim Dodd's ready to go. He's the off the street astronaut or whatever the backer.
Yep.
He's on that mission. So
we're going to work with him.
Yeah.
At the eclipse when we do our Eclipse-orama in Texas.
Great guy, very thoughtful.
Yep, everyday astronaut. He'll be live streaming during our big 2-day event in Texas, which there's still tickets available for. I had to get
that in.
Thank you.
No, I think that is one of the amazing things now as I get older is how much I was just on Mars this morning. I went to Perseverance. I went to Curiosity. I kind of looked at imagery, and it's all real time or almost, and you look at that and it is amazing. And with social media today, you have everybody's an expert right after the launch. They should have used 12 volts. Didn't they know about the Ranger?
Yep.
So you're going through all those. They're great. I mean, there's so many talented people, and they're running software and finding stuff that nobody saw. It's all good. So, but you got to weed through all that, and then in the middle of it, we didn't land on the moon. There's nobody been on.
Yeah, they're out there too, as we said.
Yeah.
Let me see what else we've got here. No, I think instead I'll follow up that with looking toward the future again. Is there any doubt in your mind that China intends to get technonauts walking on the moon as soon as they can pull it off?
Oh, I think that's the story. That's the big one. That's the sleeper. It's not a sleeper. It's already ringing bells at State Department and NASA itself with Phil Nelson, the chief.
Yeah.
He's using it as the China card up on the hill trying to get money. They're coming, he's holding up pictures, where we've got 13 sites at the South Pole where we may land the Artemis, and he's going, they're going there too. So,
yep.
And
blast from the past. And a little deja vu here.
Yeah, I took a little heat on a couple things I wrote about it in the book from a couple people. The space race concept, and I'm old enough to have seen Sputnik or whatever it was up there back, the rocket that put it up. But that's how old I am, and to watch, the whole context of the times, the space race. That was, that was really real. Ours weighed 30 pounds, theirs weighed 184.
Yep.
What? We're already behind. And you try to piece together what the Russians were, or the Soviet Union was doing back then, and I tried. I mean, it was I had my little Hallicrafters radio, listening to Radio Moscow, at night with the headphones on. I didn't want to wake the family up. Listen to cosmonauts, up in space, or Alexei Leonov did the first spacewalk. It was definitely a time that was we were kind of in a lurch there, and I do feel China is moving forward pretty quick.
Mm-hmm.
Ingredients are there. I look at the control center, and again, they got a lot of younger people in there. There are a lot of senior people, obviously, and military people, whatever, they got a heritage going now, and they got 3 people up there in their space station right now, and they just named the elements of their moon landing human program, what they're going to call them, and I can't pronounce them, but whatever they were. But the videos are there.
Mm-hmm.
The videos are there, and their will is there. Now they got to pull it off, and in May they're launching, I guess, the Chang'e 6 return sample mission to the moon.
It's that soon, right?
On the
far side, right?
Far side. Yeah, they're going, and it's pretty impressive, and that's the story to me. Watch that, play that China card. It's going to be a full deck here pretty soon.
Let me read to you another quote from the book. It's a mix of his quote and your writing, I think, once you get a little further into it. But it's another great friend of the Society, longtime board member of ours, the space historian, policy expert, John Logsdon. It is hard for me to conceive of the United States staying on the sidelines as other countries prepare to send their citizens to the moon, says John, professor emeritus at Space Policy Institute, which he founded. And I lost my place here. But the United States needs to make obvious its interest to lead space exploration in the 21st century, says Logsdon. The time for a space race to the moon has passed. The United States won that race half a century ago. But aren't we seeing some of the same forces again that led to that previous race?
That to me is, I hear beep, 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 like Sputnik. I hear them coming. It's, they're there. And, anybody that's spent any time diving into their program of what they make available, through China Central Television, they broadcast all their flights, and, you get pretty good detail on what they're trying to do and where they want to go. So that's keep an eye on that. And not that China can't have a problem, and that will be interesting when they lose a crew. Something happens, and you can get cocky in this human spaceflight business, and we found that out twice with Columbia and Challenger. You can get cocky, and I'm sure Russia got cocky and lost some crew. So I don't want to be bleak about it, but I mean, I'll be interesting to find out, or to understand how China reacts to a loss of a crew, and what that would do to their program or the public or whatever.
Let me give you a couple more here from people who have joined us for this great conversation. Susan Stalker again. Oh, I'm sorry. Nope, I read that one. Does this one say who it's from? I don't think so, but some unless it's from Amber herself, compliments on how cool Leonard's room is.
Yeah.
and a few saying we have several people, so this is from Amber, sort of consolidating some comments. Apparently some of you out there talking about how great your space.com articles are. Many of our members say that they are some among their favorites. I'm certainly one of those. I'm certainly a fan. It makes it worth going to space.com and dealing with all those pop-up ads.
Yeah, don't get me going. Never mind. That's okay. I had one time I was reading my own article, and hands came out and grabbed the article and ripped it in half. I don't know what that was. I don't know what they were selling. I couldn't figure it out.
Kevin Rush says, great point about intuitive machines. What do you think should be the science priority? I mean, what should the role of science be as we, not just with the robotic missions, but on into Artemis?
Yeah. Well, I mean, just an example was the experiment to video or, look at the thrust plume as the lander, the Intuitive Machines lander landed with the dust. That whole payload was turned off. It didn't, I gather, didn't grab any information. So that was a loss there, because there's a lot of concern about how much dust we're really going to be working there. Dust is always going to be, I think I wrote in the book, the moon is a Disneyland of dust. I mean, it's just, it's everywhere. You saw it on, all the astronauts got covered with it. A lot of really interesting new work that has to be tested on the moon. And that's one of the problems here. This is one thing that I'm kind of not angry about. I don't know what the word is. But, all these people are simulating down here as many things as they can do. There's nothing else they can do. They do a vacuum test. They do full, separation of things, electronic navigation. Try that out. All that doesn't come together until you're in that 1/6 gravity coming together. You're in the moment. And trying to simulate and put all these hodgepodge computer charts together to make sure that things working, that's always a challenge. And as far as I can tell, the whole problem with the Intuitive Machines landing was on launch. They had a cable that wasn't turned on right, or something was amiss. It was one element. Somebody missed it. They admitted that, and but that caused them a lot of concern down the road coming in.
Stephen Artemis, the CEO, said that a couple of people really beat themselves up about that. But he said, there are 10,000 things that could have been wrong. He also said in that press conference, and I heard you with your question in yesterday's media briefing, he said there were 3 things that they could not test on Earth in 1G. And that's why he thinks they'll nail it next time.
Well, I hope so, but I getting down and getting it dirty and getting it to where you exactly want to be. That's where Artemis, we really got to know that South Pole area a lot better. And that's where, if this water ice is there, which to me is still arguable. I mean, people are convinced there's tons. Paul Sputis, he'd yell at me all the time. There's water there. There's radar shows this and that, and a lot of papers here. Look, but we're not quite there yet. And this landing, the next one for IM2, the Intuitive Machines, that's an area where that water ice should be there, and they're going to have a little rocket, a little rover, shoot off and scamper around and go deep into the crater and see what's down there. So we got to know. I don't want an astronaut to fall down in there and find out what's down in there.
Nope, fall in a lava tube either. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions about the more distant future. But first, because we're already well past the top of the hour, thanks for sticking with us, everybody. Now we're going to try and make that even more worthwhile for somebody out there. Here is your question that might just win you a signed copy of Leonard's book, Moonrush, which is what we've been talking about, along with all of his other great stories. Here it is. Which one of the Ranger impactor missions in the early 1960s was the first to be completely successful? In other words, not just impact the moon, but get us pictures on the way down toward that big smash up. So the first person to put the correct answer in the chat, and we already have it, it's Robert Castaneda. Ranger 7. Congratulations, Robert. You were the first person. Now we're getting all the other folks who are coming up with it as well. God, you'd think there was someplace, Leonard, where you could just type that in and all of a sudden the answer would pop up. Wouldn't that be miraculous?
Ranger was a pretty exciting program, but 7 was great. That
Yeah.
really got us down there, and we wound up, I guess, finding out we had more craters than we realized we were going to have to deal with.
Yeah. So, Robert, I'm going to let Amber take care of getting a hold of you and figure out how we're going to get Leonard your address that we can send that book to. And it looks like it's after sundown now there in Colorado because it's gotten dark. But that's okay.
We can light.
That's all right. We can still see you. Stay up close. All right. Here's one of those more far future questions about the moon. I love the concept of a space elevator, except that I say to its proponents, there's the International Space Elevator Consortium, I think. I always tell them, come back to me when you can demonstrate a cable or a ribbon that's 100 kilometers long and able to support a lot of stuff.
Oh, details.
Yeah, small details. But then you said that the thinking is, by at least some people, that a space elevator on the moon in 1/6 G may be much more practical. And wouldn't that revolutionize things?
That would do it. Michael Lane in Seattle has been a spearhead on that concept. I put it in there. I went out to a space elevator conference and listened to everybody. Not in the elevator. We were in an actual conference room, and it was great. I mean, I love, my view is that keep an eye on the impossible things. And when I first started gathering material about space elevator, carbon, and some of the new materials weren't around. I mean, and now they are. But now, like you said, taking little vials and making miles is a big step. Yeah. And we'll see. There's still, but the moon may offer some capability there. Plus, I think we have to go back and look at Jerry O'Neill and the mass driver on the moon. Yeah. They don't need much speed. We're already lobbing artillery shells around down here. At those speeds, and the machinery is available now to put on the moon electromagnetic cannons. And Jerry O'Neill was a pioneer of mass driver on the moon and using the resources of the moon. And was a guy early in my career I was lucky to meet, Jim Arnold. At University of California, San Diego, I think. Had him sat in his office and he told me about finding water on the moon and how we're going to find it. Way back. Way back.
Go Tritons. I got 2 daughters who are graduates of UCSD.
Yeah.
Do you agree with George Sowers, who you quote in the book, talk about him saying that space offers us a third economic revolution, the first being agriculture, then, of course, the Industrial Revolution, 18th and 19th centuries. Do you think that not just the moon, but opening up the solar system offers the same level of opportunity, but also change in human life?
Well, I think it's there to talk about, and I've been talking and writing about it, and everybody's been talking about it. I haven't seen the space economy yet. The economy so far is remote sensing and telecommunications and spy satellites. I mean, that's the space economy. I mean, we got a lot riding on that, but using resources on the moon. And what are we going to really find there that's going to be useful? I mean, Jack Schmidt is a big helium-3 fan and believes that we'll come along. When he started talking about, we weren't very far along on fusion reactors. And now you got to keep your eye on what's going on in fusion. So we'll see. I probably won't be around to see any kind of windfall coming in, but my guess is that's going to be part of the future. But how we first divvy up the moon, I'm more concerned about who gets there first and does a water rights issue or something that the UN is going to freak out. And the Outer Space Treaty, people are, I can Depends on who I'm talking to. They hate it. They love it. It's not specific enough. It's too specific, you know. And so the lawyer side of all this is fascinating, watching the terminology of moon evolve and how we're going to do this common heritage of mankind. It sounds wonderful. It's very embraceful. It ain't going to happen. I'm a little worried. I think we got some problems coming, and the lawyers are already there. You know, so I know it's going to be a field day.
But one would hope that we might actually realize this for the benefit of, to paraphrase the Neil and Buzz and that plaque left by Apollo 11, that we would do this for all humankind.
Yeah.
All humankind.
Yeah. Well, one hopes. I mean, I think we will find some common denominators about how tough it is to do what we think we can do. And by teaming up, we should, you know, I'm a big advocate of making sure that the U.S. Research community has access to Chinese samples. That's going forward now, and several American scientists look like they're going to have access to the Chinese sample return.
That's great. That's good news. Pandas and pieces of the moon. That's that. I call
pandas
that
and pieces of the moon. I have to use. Let me write that down.
Pandas and pieces of the moon. You may use that. You may use that. I got one more from you from one of our viewers, and then I think we'll wrap it up.
All right.
And it's kind of where I wanted to go. From Pranish Ban, is Mars a one-way trip? And I'm going to go from that to the distinguished researcher, planetary scientist that you quote, who said, "You can't be a Martian without being a lunatic."
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, well, that's the go to moon first, learn how to crawl before we walk. I think we're going to be crawling before we walk. We'll probably be moonwalking before we can crawl to Mars. You know, it's going to be it's a long haul, different kind of environment. But you know, we're very successful in landing these robots on Mars, and so I do think the moon is the right way to go. I've always felt that was the stepping stone approach, and unfortunately, in my time frame, we cut bait with the 72 post-Apollo 17 landing in December, and that was it. Waved goodbye to the moon for a long time, and China will be there waving, I think. You know, I'm not quite sure what the time is going to be, but they're hoping to get there before 2030. And so we'll see, but you know, that's why it's so much fun right now. There's so many angles and so many things that can succeed, blow up, policy wrong, policy right. Lawyers are floating around the edges at all times. So yeah, it's really an exciting time, and it's great to still be writing about it all.
And through all of this, all these trials, tribulations, and triumphs, there's red Mars hanging out there beckoning.
Yeah. Well, we got I just read the NASA Inspector General report on the Mars sample return.
I got to get to that.
Oh yeah, you guys are into that one. That one is a real dicey situation, particularly when we have so many opportunities to use a lot of money to get the Enceladus, Titan, and do a lot more exploration of other places that have potential for life signatures. It's a tough call, and my only hope is that this lunar sample swap with China does well with the Mars sample return if the Chinese do that first.
Yeah, which it looks like they might.
Mars is so diverse, you can bring samples back from all kinds of places. There is no, that's the only place to sample. So,
Blind Man and the Elephant. Here's a line of yours from the very end of the book. Whenever and however a return to the moon occurs, one thing is assured. That return will be historically comparable to the movement of our species out of Africa about 150,000 years ago. If led by an entity representing the democracies of the earth, our return to the moon will rejuvenate the foundations of self-government that continue to enhance human well-being. Those words, to me anyway, seem even more important today than they might have seemed to you 5 years ago.
Well, make sure that's not Jack Schmidt saying that, is it?
Oh, I thought it was you. I'm pretty sure it's you, but I'd have to open up.
Did I write that? That sounded good.
I guess you'll hear from Jack I'll hear from Jack.
Some words in there. I thought maybe I borrowed that from Jack Schmidt, because Jack really is a very compelling speaker about that. It's hard to say, God, we don't want to get off into politics, but I mean, we're in a very interesting time at all times, with politics, and how NASA plays out in its budgetary commitments, and how much Congress coughs up. And getting back to the Mars sample return, $10-11 billion, it ain't there. If that's the high end, and people are busy working, how to do it on the cheap, and I'm not sure how that happens, but we'll see. It's a great story evolving.
Leonard, I hope that you and I are both around to see those rocks come back from Mars, and to see those, what do they say, the next man and the first woman to walk on the moon. It's an ongoing drama and a story for the ages, and you have been absolutely outstanding at telling it. And I knew that this would be another terrific conversation with you for the book club. So thank you. I mean, it's been an hour and 20 minutes now. Thanks so much for spending the time.
Okay, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It was great to go through. We're both still standing.
Yep. Keep standing. I want to give a plug to our next book, and I forgot to open it up. I wonder how quickly I can do this. I'll try and do this fast and easy by going to, because I may be able to pull up the cover. At least I hope so. There it is. Somebody I bet you know. Space Shuttle Stories, First-Hand Astronaut Accounts from All 135 Missions. It's very, very good. I'm really enjoying the book, and it is our choice for next time, next month here in the book club, when my guest toward the end of March will be astronaut author Tom Jones. He has been a good friend of ours on Planetary Radio, and a good writer, and now he has collected stories about every single one of the shuttle missions. 135, I think. Anyway, that's something to pick up and join us with as we talk about it across March, and then welcome astronaut Tom Jones the same way we have welcomed Leonard David, the Dean of Space Journalists, Space Reporters this evening. Again, Leonard, thanks very much.
Hey, great to be with you, and just remember, reach for the stars, but stoop for reality.
I love it. Ad astra per aspera. Another way of saying that, right? Yeah. Thanks, everybody, for joining us once again. We love having you as members, and we thank you so much for your support that makes this book club and everything else we do possible. So have a great evening, a great month, and we'll see you with the book club again soon, and more coming from the community even before we talk with Tom Jones. Stay tuned. We have some celebrations ahead. Amber Trujillo, thanks very much again for your support as well. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.